Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Ordinary Joe. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with the musician reality as we have Joe dumping everything into the tour. The moment like you see him kind of going on stage, place after place, town after town, city after city, state after state, I immediately took that as like, I thought he was going to start being so you see him drinking and stuff, so I figured he was going to spiral out, and I thought it was going to happen on stage. It never did. There is some form of separation where it's like, once again, he gets to be on stage, he's drowning out his sorrows, both on and off stage, but by being on stage, he's able to surround himself, because I think there's a larger metaphor for the fact is that his relationship, his marriage is kind of imploding, that basically he's looking for the love and admiration of a crowd to like fill that void to some extent. Plus, it's easier to surround yourself. It gives you something else to focus on, but he's thinking like, oh, that's the solution, when in actuality, it's the problem. Hell, he's even sleeping with someone. It's like, you're still married. Yes, your wife made a mistake. Two wrongs don't make a right. She's doing everything to make up for that mistake. And yes, there have been some complications because of that mistake. And that's the thing. And that ends up being a staple to what is part of Joe's story, musician Joe's story, is that, I mean, and this applies once again all across the board for Joe. He has a tendency of not always facing his problems head on. He has a tendency to run from. He doesn't like confrontation. It's never, which, once again, I can understand that as someone who, that's kind of your defense mechanism of like, you don't want to deal with things like, I mean, and that's not just like some people have that. I mean, some people are able to face their issues straight on, while other people, I think it's a common enough human trait, not just like, only a few people. It's like, no, I think in the grand scheme of things, a lot of people have issues like confronting stuff of that nature, because you're trying to decide what do you want to do. Once again, I said it last episode, him texting her was a garbage thing to do. Like, have that conversation with her. He couldn't sit down with her face to face. He couldn't have that conversation with her. He could have told that to her face. What'd he do? He texted it to her. And now he's partying. He's sleeping with someone. Even his Uncle Frank is trying to call him out. But Frank doesn't have as much sway, because Frank's like, the moment I started working for him, our entire dynamic changed. Because it's like, right, I no longer became like, I'm Uncle Frank, but only in a sense of like, yeah, you work for me, so like what I say kind of goes. You're not the pseudo father figure in my life anymore. Because Frank had talked about, coming from his perspective of drinking and stuff like that. And even his publicist, I think Joe's publicist, or either that or she's his manager. Well, no, I think his uncle's his manager. I think she's his publicist. Tried to say like, oh, like you've been through the program, like you've been where he is. Like she's like, how do you pick him up after something like this? He's like, he's never been like this before. Yes, Joe's had his downsides before, but I wonder, is that supposed to be a little representative of? Not saying that musician Joe hasn't had any bad in his life, but nothing like this has happened. Like probably the last time Joe probably experienced something of this magnitude, it's not the same, but a heavy magnitude thing, was when his dad died. That's probably like a big traumatic moment in his life, and it's just, this is a life-altering situation that's here. It's a big, big impact on his life. So that's the only parallel I can make. They're not a one-to-one, and they're not meant to be compared, but it's like these are two monumentous moments in his life. So he probably has had other falls in his life, but nothing like this. And he's spiraling and spinning. And especially the way things played out with Zeke and his parents, like, now, like, that's kind of sour, but that's also a byproduct of him trying to, drown his sorrows with the whole Amy thing. Once again, he keeps trying to find something else to fill that void to some extent, and he finds plenty of vices, whether it's the lady he's with this episode, who kind of, I don't know. You would have thought that at some point she would have pulled back to be like, he's probably not in his right mind, but it's like, right, you're enjoying the party and stuff like that. Because I don't know whether it's a thing of like, oh, it's Joe Kimbrough that I'm with, so maybe she's kind of just enjoying that. Just like, oh, but maybe it's just like, no, she finds him fun, and it's just like, all that's kind of aside the point. Because she was like a nutritionalist as at first. It seems like she was just brought onto the team, and now it's like, oh, like, now we see there's more to it. It's just gut-wrenching. And also, like, Joe calling up Amy, being like, yeah, we made a mistake. Basically making it sound like their entire relationship was a mistake, which is like garbage on your part. Yes, she made a mistake, but to basically be like, everything between us was a mistake. We've hit the end of the road. This is the end. It's like, once again, this is his first time really like probably saying anything since he texted her, because even Amy's under the impression like, right, he's gonna be back in town so we can actually talk. And instead of actually coming to see me, he didn't like try to call me again. He left a voicemail and said we're done. Amy tried to call him back. It's like he can't even face her face to face, you know. Obviously, because of the snow and everything, his publicist was like, no, we're canceling all the tour. He's like, no, this is me. This is my offer. She's like, you know what? I know where this is going. I'm not going to feed into it. You want to figure, you go right ahead. But the fact of the matter is, I'm canceling the tours because it isn't just about you. Yes, you want to drown your sorrows and stuff like that. I get it. This tour, that's all this is for you. But there are plenty of people that work under you, and their safety comes first. Considering like with everything going on, you want to put on a show. It's like people won't even be able to make it to the shows. It's like, once again, he's being selfish. He's, you're hurting. I get it. And when you're hurting, sometimes you say and you do things and you lash out, say and do all the things you don't mean to do. Hell, even later on, Frank was trying to talk to him, and what did he do? He's like, oh, you've been kind of uptight here, and offered his uncle a drink. That is a shitty thing to do. You know what that means to him, the fact is your hand, and that's what made Frank go, you know what, I'm done. I love you, kid. I made a promise to my brother that we'd look after each other, but I can't do this anymore. I can't work for you anymore, because the fact is, I'm grateful. He's like, you saved my life, because of all this, Frank was able to stay sober. He was on the good side of things, which I love that this is an inverse of where things are in the police reality. But I just thought that in itself is just like the nail in the coffin, because I'm like, this is it. You're on your own. And he's like, yeah, like, I'm a storm or something like that. Like, nothing's going to get in my way. And then the power cuts out. And it's like, oh, I think it's beautiful and symbolic. And in that moment, you've cut away everyone. Your wife, your uncle. You're sure as hell not talking to your mom right now, are you? You're cutting away the rest of your family because he is spiraling. Part of me wonders also, is there some level, like, there might be some predications is what I'm trying to say, that are there because, once again, like, his sister talked about the fact is that, like, dad wasn't the best person, so, like, he had probably some issues of its own, like, that, whether his are the same as Frank's and Joe's, like, Joe, like, drinking, like, that doesn't just come out of nowhere, maybe. I mean, maybe it is. It's just maybe like, oh, I'm just going to, but, like, the fact is, he slides in it the way he is. We know his uncle has issues with it. Makes you wonder, did his dad ever have issues? So, like, that could be, there could be some parallels of, like, yeah, he's spiraling a little, like, maybe his dad had the police force to kind of focus him, and everything else was kind of, yeah, there were issues, but, because once again, they touched on that a little with Celeste in the Thanksgiving episode, but we never really circled back to beyond that. But, and then at the, speaking of Amy, now she feels like the miracle that, oh my God, I had, like, after everything, it's like, right, her being pregnant, and now it's like, she feels like this miracle baby, it's costing her marriage. It's like she has to basically make an ultimatum, choose, like, it's like, I'm kind of stuck between these two, a rock and a hard place, and she's like, I didn't think I'd have to go this alone, and Eric's like, you're not alone, you got a whole system, you got a whole, like, village here to help you, that includes me, because he made it clear, like, Joe do whatever he needs to do, but also it's like he brought up he cares about Amy just like her mom does as well, just like his mom does as well. So they'll be there for her when Joe isn't, which Joe's going to be under some complicated circumstances, because the moment he's drinking and you're like, oh, well, he's driving with her, I'm like, oh, this is going to end bad, and we hard cut to them crashing. So there are a multitude ways this is going to fall out. One, it's going to be a massive, like, oh, like, who knows what this will do to his future as a musician, because, who knows, like, he might be, like, paralyzed after something like this, and it's up to Amy to take care of him despite everything. Even though she has every reason not to, she's going to be there for him because that's who Amy is. Two, the fact is that, did that lady die in a car accident? Whether she did or she didn't, she can most likely sue Joe because it was like, oh, he was intoxicated. So, well, there's also that too. There's probably going to be, like, charges filed against him for driving under the influence. So there's that. She could end up suing him, or her family could end up suing him if she dies. So I can definitely see that hitting him all at once. Plus, it's like, cool, you're going to be, like, I think he's going to make it. I think he's going to be okay, but the thing is, like, is his arms going to be messed up? Will he be able to play a guitar or play, like, an instrument anymore? Like, like I said, will he be paralyzed? That's the thing, too, like, this might be, because and I saw this somewhere and I thought it was interesting that, and I'm not saying this is applicable to everyone, it was just online I saw somewhere, and I don't remember who it was in relation to, but someone was talking about how rock bottom isn't enough to, like, oh, like, get you sober type of thing of, like, yeah, just because you hit rock bottom, that doesn't mean anything. We've seen that time and time again, like using another show, for example, Hightown with Jackie. Jackie has hit rock bottom quite a few times. Now, is this most recent situation the most rock bottom she can get, or what? Once again, she's filling voids in her own right, so we'll see. Maybe this will be the wake-up call Joe needs. Maybe not. I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where things kind of go on that front. Then, you know, on the flip side of things, we had the detective reality where obviously Joe is talking to Jenny about some of his issues with, like, how things went down last episode between him, her, and Eric. And she's like, right, she can tell, like, what's on his mind. And it's like, yeah, that I chose Eric. And he was like, yeah, like, I was just trying to, he's my son. I just want to get to know him. It's like, you know, you're probably wondering, like, why I kept it a secret from him. She's like, I tried to tell you. He's like, I would have been there. But for her, it's like, and she tells him the TS situation, the too soon, because she had plans. And he was like, yeah, I always knew your life was going to be bigger than me. She's like, no, all my plans included you. And it's just, there was so much happening at that time. It's like, she found out she was pregnant. Sometime afterwards, her mom died, and he wasn't around to lean on. It's like he was off the grid, like, you know, it was all his police training and stuff like that. And I guess, you know, the reason why he kind of went off the grid is because he was trying to figure his life out afterwards. Because I think that's also, we've seen what happens the moment he went to see Jenny. That's the whole nursing reality of him being there for her. But the thing is, though, who knows how things would have been different, like him coming back from the police reality, like how, like, he probably would have followed this path to after everything with Jenny. I think that solidified it for him, and that's why he followed the police path in this reality. But who knows what would have happened if because several months later, he tried to track down Jenny and talk to her after figuring everything out, but it was already kind of too late. We'll get to that in a second, but who knows what that reality would have been like if he found out in that moment she was pregnant. He just had to figure things out on his own, and just, especially with his Uncle Frank pushing him to take the career that, you know, because being a cop meant a lot to him, because it was an opportunity to be just like following his dad's footsteps, be a little closer to his dad. So that's going to come with its own complications, but obviously the whole conversation about, like, once again, the speech we got in the in a couple episodes back about in the nursing reality, where she told him the truth about the TS, the too soon, and she's like, right, in this one instance you were too late. Your name is ironic because it was the instance where you were too late. But later on, when he's talking to Eric one-on-one, Eric's like, she told me that she talked to you. She didn't tell you everything. He's the one that convinced her not to open that door, because it's like, right, when Joe showed up, it's like sending him away, because he's like, right, I was there for you, like, when your mom died. I was that shoulder you could cry on and lean on, and I've been there with you every step of the way there. Like, let me be this baby's father. Because it's like, right, Joe had a right to know, but in that moment, it was true. Ray was there for her in all the ways that Joe wasn't. So it's also like, right, like him just coming back out. You know, you could almost make some argument, maybe it's like, oh, you coming back into our lives now, into her life now after all this. It's like, oh, you had to go figure things out while she had to figure things out on her own because you weren't there. Like, you didn't return any of her calls, you basically ghosted her. Once again, a lot of contributing factors. Because I forgot, like, this is also predicated on, like, we learned that he was, he had read his dad's letter and everything, too. And obviously, like, he was already going down the cop path, and that just kind of solidified it more for him. But regardless, obviously for Joe, he just felt like, wait, that wasn't your choice to make. He was like, it wasn't my choice. I put that out there, and Jenny decided on it. And for him, it's like, right, because even Ray knows like how messed up it kind of is. But for him, it's like, the fact is that he's like, I wanted to give that kid the entire world. But then like after he was born, he's like, Lucas became my entire world. And he's like, I've been dreading the day that, you know, he eventually will find out that I'm not his father, that you would come back into the picture. And he doesn't want to lose that. It's like, he doesn't want to lose his world. Like, you are my son. You know, I am his father. And obviously it hits Joe hard because it's like, right, I don't want to take that from you in any shape or form. And obviously when he goes to see Jenny and he's like, I would have been there. You know, she's like, well, you're here now. And obviously when the lights go out at the hospital, he's freaking out and panicking. It's like, no, give us an answer. Like, you know, maybe I should go back there. I am a cop. Maybe I'll get some answers. Because they didn't know if, like, those medical rooms and stuff like that, whether they were on the same power. Like, so who knows how the surgery is going to be affected. And even Joe's asking them, like, how are you not freaking out? They're like, yeah, we've been freaking out for the past 10 years. You know, but when it came time to see Lucas, I love that, you know, obviously Eric's like, no, come on, like, you want to see him, you can. And obviously, you know, his Jeannie promised to be the first person he saw, and she is. And in that moment, he's like, oh, Dad. And then Joe's kind of like, I'll go, you know, obviously he's asking for you, and he leaves because, yes, he wanted to see Lucas, to know he was okay, but also it's like, right, this is their moment. Like, I might want a connection with you, but I don't want to implode all of this. This is their lives. I don't want to take that away from Eric, because no matter what the circumstances may be, even if I would have been there, Eric has been there and was there. So I don't want to destroy this family. I don't want to mess that up. He is my son, and I'll help him, you know. And I think going forward, you know, I think, once again, like, Eric kind of comes off like a douchebag last episode but even then I was like, I get it and I understand. That's why I was also like, it just seemed hypocritical with the boundary things, but it's like, right, it's just like, you know, Ray opened up about his insecurities about, like, right, I don't want to lose my son. He's my entire world. I don't want that to kind of be taken from me. So he'll, you know, and I think that's just a lot for Joe. There's interesting setup with Amy in this, that obviously she's starting her podcast and she wants to talk about, you know, her perspective on law enforcement changes, you know, God, what's the word I'm looking for? Reform is the word I'm looking for. A lot of, like, some of the, like, the systems reforms and stuff like that. And obviously she would want Joe to do it, but he's like, no, I don't want to do it. She's like, oh, you can be famous. And he's like, I don't want to be famous. It literally hard cuts to him being super famous in the musician reality. I thought that was kind of a nice thing. But also it's like, cool, like, all my parents are coming in too, so I want them to meet you. And he's like, yeah. She's like, you probably also don't want to wear that either. He's like, understandable. I'm curious how her dad would react. Well, mom too, but dad in general, like how he in particular will react to her dating a cop and what that means. I think that's going to be an interesting conversation, because it's going to be a perspective of someone who is a cop, who wants to do good for the community, who wants to be a good cop like his dad was, following in his father's footsteps, but also from someone who's been on the other side of the criminal system, not because you were a bad guy, but you got railroaded. Like, so I'm curious how those two perspectives, like, will they be able to come together, because they are both people who love Amy and care about her deeply? Will they be able to put their issues aside, or will they be able to find some common ground, or will they just not mesh? That's definitely going to be interesting. Obviously, like, he had come back home during the blackout and found his uncle. Like I said, I love the inverse of, like, it's the literal opposite of the musician reality in that regard. But his uncle's like, yeah, like, Frank's like, there's going to be a reevaluation on me potentially getting my job back. So basically, it would go a long way if you spoke on my behalf. But he was like, but you're still drinking. He was like, yeah, but drinking, like, the moment I get my job back, it'll be fine. Like, as you just said, you got to look out for family, right? Because he had asked him, like, oh, you went to see that kid you had with Jenny? It's kind of going on a deep end, right? And it's like, yeah, you have to look out for family. So at the end of the day, because Joe's going to be caught between two crosshairs there, because it's like, do you recommend Frank to get his job back, even though he's not the same person who lost his job? Because it's like, right, he's drinking again, he's falling apart. Like, would it be right to do that? Because just getting back on a job doesn't guarantee he'll sober up. That he may start drinking on the job, and that'll be complications. Can you, in all good conscience, do that? But the thing is, this is your uncle. You already, regardless of you trying to do the right thing, and at the end of the day, you doing the right thing, it still doesn't change the fact is that you feel guilty about, like, right, like your uncle lost his job and everything, like you knew, so you feel a certain responsibility because as he says in the musician reality, it's Uncle Frank's like, we were promised to look out for each other. Like, I've looked after you in your entire life. Now it's time for you to look after me. So I think at the end of the day, Joe's going to do the right thing. And I do believe the right thing is to not, help out him, because he's not in a good spot until he shows that he's better. Like, just like how Frank is kind of, well, I think that's also the thing too of like, oh, you shouldn't quit on family, even though, like, technically speaking, Frank quit when it came to Joe. But I think it's a tough love thing, and I think the same thing is going to apply in this situation where Joe's going to do a tough love thing of like, no, I'm not going to help you get your job back until you actually sober up and show that you're in a good spot and a good mindset. So we'll have to wait and see where things kind of go on that front. And then obviously in the nursing reality, we have obviously everything with the zipper pants is going great. Obviously they have their pitch meeting, and I love that Joe's all about graphs and stuff, and they're like, oh, it's kind of bland. Kinsley's like, it's kind of bland. Even Chris is like, yeah, that's kind of messed up. It's kind of boring, and everything. And he was just like, no. And he tries it, but the entire, like, thing comes crashing down, and it's like, oh, please tell me you backed up. He's like, I didn't back up a single thing. I'm like, I love how that kind of fell apart. Obviously things are going good on both sides of things. Obviously for Joe and Chris, it's like the zipper pants situation. For Jenny, things are working better. Like, obviously she's working towards becoming a lawyer in a couple months, graduating and actually officially becoming a lawyer. But also, like, her teacher isn't, like, it's kind of a tough love thing. If she comes off a little bit like a hard ass, but it's like, right now, because of what Jenny found out last episode, now is going to be the cornerstone of their defense. And now she gets to do the closing arguments and stuff like that. So things are looking really good for her. I love the whole thing for Chris and Joe, because the pitch meeting, because Kinsley, like, did all the work. She did the presentation because it was being done over Zoom. So she modified everything to kind of add a little bit of a personal touch. And is even telling Joe to kind of come up with a little jingle. He's like, I don't think, she's like, come on, just do it. And he's like, fine, all right. And so the pitch meeting does go off, and it's like, and I love the guy was like, man, thank you. You guys actually made this fun. I mean, people do a whole bunch of stuff with graphs, and he's like, yeah. Just like, of course, we wouldn't do something like that. Who would do something like that? So it's like, that's kind of a nice touch. But also, like, Chris and that guy's daughter are hitting it off. They're becoming good friends, which even Chris is in this complicated spot because he's like, oh, like, he thought he liked Amy, but then him and Katie, like, have a lot more in common. So what do you do when you like two different people? And he was like, there's, like, a lot of incredible people in this world. And you could see Chris was almost like, thanks, Dad. That was super insightful. Like, it wasn't, it didn't really give him the answer. It's probably like in those moments, it's like, right, probably would have helped to have Jenny there. But I think that's also the interesting aspect of, like, we've seen how that works out of, like, right, you and Amy in a different reality. Obviously, you and Jenny in another reality. I mean, obviously, you and Jenny have your back. I mean, because that was also a thing, like, he bumped into Amy. He kind of had a thing for her. Like, immediately, there was this moment in his connection. But obviously, we know, like, him and Jenny were already, like, on that. They were best friends, but they crossed those lines into something more. At least, like, there being something more in those moments. So that was already before the realities kind of, obviously his life took the different paths that it did, but I think that's fascinating how that all works out in that regard, because he felt that to some extent, but I guess he doesn't really want to bring that up, and it's kind of coming full circle a little bit too, because of potentially the whole him and Kinsley thing, because she was initially going to leave, but she kind of got stuck here, and he was like, no, I'm offering you, like, you could sleep in the room, and I'll sleep on the bed. The couch. But then the power goes out. And so, like, all the while that's happening, because it turns out they don't want to buy the zipper pants from them. They actually want to like bring in the company and them on board to make them. So it's like, yeah, we're going to make a lot of money, which I even love Chris was saying, like, yeah, like, I want to get paid. And it's like, Joe being like, he wants to get paid, Mom. So you have to, what they're going to do with all of their riches and stuff like this from this. Because obviously it's a good idea and it's going to help a lot of people who could benefit from the zipper pants. At the same time, Jenny is obviously celebrating big time because of like on her way to becoming a lawyer and stuff like that. So like these dreams and ambitions she has, it's finally within view. And obviously her friend like ends up bringing her back to her room and laying her down. And she's like, oh, I love in that moment. He's almost like, yeah, I should get out. I was like, oh, good guy, you. Because like he kind of likes Jenny, but even he recognized that's a boundary I shouldn't cross. So I'm like, oh, I'm just going to leave. I should leave now. I'm like, oh, wow. And then because obviously Jenny's thanking him because it's like, right, she wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. And she's like, I love Atlanta. It's presenting me this opportunity. And then she says this line is, I grew up too soon. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Because at least, and I think it applies like not just in this reality, it applies all across realities. I think it is the thing that Jenny had life thrown at her. Like obviously she's pregnant like around graduation, so like that applies across all the realities. How she handles it and what the circumstances around it are different. But it is a situation of that still reigns true, and so it's that dealing with her mom's death, trying to work to become a lawyer. Like life has kind of thrown a lot to her, so she's never really had a chance to just like be a regular teenager, like around college and stuff like that. Or young adult. She just like life kind of threw a lot of fastballs her way, so she kind of just like she had to grow up even faster under certain circumstances. I think is kind of what they're kind of saying in that regard, which I think is supposed to be kind of like a little bit of an inverse to the whole Joe being the too soon situation. I think it's just the aspect of life happened too soon in certain regards because she had to put a lot of her dreams on hold because of like Chris and everything, and they just had to, both of them had to put their dreams aside for a little bit. Obviously that was a conversation and worry on Chris's behalf early on in the show. But then we get our stinger at the end in the musician, in that reality, that nursing reality, when Kinsley and Joe are kind of hitting it off because it's a thing of, right, she doesn't see life for what it is. She sees it for the what if, because it's like, right, you jump jobs in the middle of a pandemic. You kind of like, she's very free spirited. He's very rigid a little bit in what he does, because it's like, oh, what are you going to do with the money from all the big bucks you're going to make from this whole thing? And he was like, oh, I'm going to pay off this mortgage that's been hanging over her head. She's like, boring. So she's a lot more free spirited, and once again kind of ties into the fact is, oh, he kind of likes those aspects about her. And I guess because almost like she's kind of represents that, a little bit of that quote unquote freedom, a little bit of the seriousness and everything that is their lives to some extent. And so I guess she almost feels that like Amy void a little bit in that reality for him, because obviously she's with Eric. So but and just when they ended up having to cancel their therapy sessions too, this and that. Now, did they actually kiss? It's implied they lean in, but we don't know. We won't find out later on until like, oh, they pull back and stuff like that, because we'll see. Next week's episode is the season finale, so it's definitely going to be interesting to ultimately see where everything takes us across all three realities, how everything plays out at the end of the season. I'm very excited to find out. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.